What do you call it when a movement takes up arms and seizes power by the barrel of a gun? Moves into the homes of those they've dispossessed and says this whole country is ours now that we've won. What do you call a government that forces families from their homes and turns them into refugees? All the while complaining of these dirty tent dwellers that it's they who want to drive us into the sea. What do you call a government that builds walls around the ghettos and only looks at you through sniper sights? Who uses your cheap labor to build those very walls while they tell the world how they believe in human rights? What do you call a government that makes war upon their neighbors, who annexes land for living room? Who conducts a foreign policy based on threats and bombing raids, whose opponents often end up in a prison or a tomb? What do you call a government who talks of enemies within and seals off the camps to make sure they cannot eat, who keeps their prisoners on diets to guarantee an early death with their mantra, history cannot repeat? What do you call a government that puts numbers on the arms of the people that they torture and arrest? Whose soldiers commit war crimes systematically while they proclaim their conduct is superior at best? What do you call a government that bombs its starving subjects after taking from them everything they had? Whose citizens are soldiers, brainwashed to believe their opponents are fanatics, terrorists or mad? What do you call it when a movement takes up arms and seizes power by the barrel of a gun? Moves into the homes of those they've dispossessed and says this whole country is ours now that we've won.
Good morning or afternoon or evening, everybody. This is David Rovics, and this is a special broadcast I'm doing on Palestine 101. That was from my CD. Somebody on the chat room, we're here but can't hear you yet. Hopefully you can hear me now. It looks like it's coming through. That track was from my album Everything Can Change. You can hear that free on soundcloud.com/David Rovics, or get it on Bandcamp. Buy the CD if you want. I think it's a pertinent question. What do we call it? What is it? We're not allowed to use the F word, but what do you call a country that creates walled ghettos, starves the people inside the ghettos, and then bombs the ghettos? There's not a whole lot of precedent for that specific type of behavior, and I think it tends to attract certain comparisons, and then if you make such comparisons, you're called an anti-Semite, which is a very convenient thing to be able to say about somebody. Helps to shut them up, given the history of anti-Semitism. And speaking of the history of anti-Semitism, Europe has a terrible, terrible problem with anti-Semitism historically. It's a terrible European problem. The Inquisitions and the Crusades and fascism. And violent nationalism of many different forms, but it has much less of a history in the Middle East. This kind of thing. Although when you listen to Europeans and North Americans talk about history, you would think it was that the opposite was true. That the problem with with different ethnic groups and religious groups and linguistic groups, and in the Middle East has a long problem of conflict, history of conflict, whereas in Europe it's all hunky dory. But in fact, before the 20th century, before colonialism destroyed the Ottoman Empire, things were a lot better in the Middle East in terms of different groups getting along and living together. And such was the case in Palestine, where Jews, Christians, and Muslims had lived together for many, many centuries without much of a problem. And in fact, of course, when Jews and Muslims and others were persecuted in Europe, it is the Ottoman Empire, Istanbul, Jerusalem, and places like that people fled to and lived in peacefully for a long, long time. And when the Zionist movement violently kicked out 700,000 people from their homes in 1948 or thereabouts, then they started a global tradition of people within the Palestinian diaspora who just wanted to go home. And that's really what this is all about.
I was born a refugee, and I don't know if I'll ever see the old farmhouse I've heard about, but it's where I belong, there is no doubt. 'Cause my whole family is from that farm. We never did nobody harm. And if you're confused by what you heard, let me boil it down to a single word. I wanna go home. I wanna go home. I have heard my grandpa say that on the street most every day the neighbors' kids would kick a ball with my dad when he was small. We were Christians, they were Jews, but it was no big deal, religious views. So it was strange when at the point of a gun across the river we had to run. I wanna go home. I wanna go home. We had Dipke, we had songs, and we all knew where we belonged. We grew crops, life was good there in the land where Jesus stood. Now we're scattered everywhere, but there's no peace anywhere. And I'm just searching for some kind of sign, for some way back to Palestine. I wanna go home. I wanna go home. I wanna go home. I wanna go home.
That's I Want to Go Home from the album For the Moment. And Sean Staples and Dave West on those ethereal musical sounds there. It's often said by people, involved with one way or another with the dispute between the Palestinians and the state of Israel, that people don't, the Arab states and various Palestinian movements don't want to recognize Israel and Israel's right to exist. And of course, the whole concept of recognizing Israel's right to exist is problematic because it is an apartheid state. Because it's a Jewish state where anybody who's not Jewish is a second-class citizen by definition. And of course, most or many people living under occupation of the Jewish state are not even citizens, like in the West Bank and Gaza. So that in itself is a big problem. But then there's the question of where, if you did recognize the apartheid state, if you did say that a Jewish-dominated state has a right to exist within the Arab world, and that Palestinians are second-class citizens and should just accept that, even if you did have that position, then the question is, where are the borders of this Jewish state? Generally, if a state wants recognition, it needs to be able to define its own borders, which Israel is unable to do so far.
Netanyahu's in a tizzy. His eyes are filled with hate. He said the problem with those Arabs is they won't recognize a Jewish state. He said those Palestinians just won't come around to accepting Jewish rule on their holy ground. He said the Arabs don't accept their new neighbors in the hood. Those ungrateful regimes don't respect us as they should. Well, I don't want to upset anyone or unduly take to task, but if a state wants recognition, it seems reasonable to ask, where are your borders? Where are your borders? Where are your borders? Where are your borders? I heard him speaking to the Congress, getting his 29th standing O. He said, we need our security from those terrorists, don't you know? Well, if you want security, I wonder if you'd say it's true that the Palestinians should have security too. Because if you want security, it seems only fair that you should also grant it to the people over there. And maybe you could answer, though the question is a sin, just where your country ends and your neighbor's lands begin. Where are your borders? Where are your borders? Where are your borders? Where are your borders? We're the only democracy in the Middle East. Or actually, he said the only viable one, at least. The PA isn't viable because they didn't vote Abbas. They voted for those terrorists that they call Hamas. So we can't recognize them, though we wish they would agree that we stole their land quite fairly here by the Mediterranean Sea. We stole it fair and square. We stole it just like you. If you don't like it, you're an anti-Semite, whether you're a Muslim or a Jew. Okay, right. But tell me, where are your borders? 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 Where are your borders?
That's Israeli Geography 101 from my album Meanwhile in Afghanistan, which you can download for free at davidrovics.com or by donation. Donations welcome. Cost a lot of money to pay all those musicians. The key, the symbol of the key, is the most probably common and very potent symbol of the Palestinian diaspora. If you are in a refugee camp, if a Palestinian refugee camp anywhere in the Middle East, or if you're in the home of Palestinians anywhere in the diaspora or in the West Bank or anywhere else, you're quite likely to see the symbolism of the key, and you're quite likely to see an actual key hanging around somebody's neck. And sometimes, in many cases, these keys that you'll see are the actual keys to the homes that people were kicked out of in 1948 or in 1967 or at other times in history. You'll often meet people who were kicked out of their homes multiple times over generations, who are refugees twice or three times. And this is a song I wrote well, it was recorded in 2003. I think I wrote it around that time, 2002 or 3, after listening to an interview with Sami Al-Aryan, Dr. Sami Al-Aryan, about his mother and her experiences as a Palestinian refugee.
Let me tell you about a lady known as Grandma to me. She died back in 1982. She liked to tell stories of how things used to be, just like other old ladies do. She talked about her neighbors, Muslims and Christians, Arabs, Britons and Jews. They'd come over for dinner in her house in Jaffa. They'd talk about business and news. We got along fine a long time ago, before everything started to change. I never imagined back in those days I'd end up here on this firing range. There on a string around her neck, dangling in front of her heart, the key to her home, the key to her people, the key to her world, blown apart. I recall the days well, 1948, the year of the catastrophe. With machine guns and torches, they drove us away to the land of the refugee. We all thought it would pass, but the decades dragged on, and my heart turned to flame. To those who live in my home, where is your conscience? Do you feel the remorse and the shame? There on a string around her neck, dangling in front of her heart, the key to her home, the key to her people, the key to her world, blown generations, I and her grandchildren say, the key is theirs and mine. And all over the world we cry for Al-Auda, home in Palestine. Maybe we will prevail, but come what may, as empires fall and rise, nothing will change the memory of the tears in my grandmother's eyes. There on a string around her neck, dangling in front of her heart, the key to her home, the key to her people, the key to her world, blown apart.
That's the key from my 2003 album, The Return, Al-Auda. And I'll do another song from that album. And by the way, if anybody's listening out there, feel free to join the chat room and say hello. I'm feeling lonely. I like Hannah, but there's only one person in there, and somebody else should say hi. Let me know that you're out there. Why, I don't know, because you could be listening to this later next week or something. But if you're out there listening, feel free to say hello. And there's moving on to another song. It is often said by oftentimes well-meaning people that the problem is that people need to talk to each other and understand each other, and there needs to be more dialogue. And dialogue and understanding and sympathy and empathy and all that is really, really good stuff and cannot be over emphasized in terms of its importance. I completely agree. However, if people think that the whole question is around dialogue and understanding, then they are very, very thoroughly missing the point, because the problem is a problem of occupation. It's a problem of a violent apartheid movement called Zionism, taking over somebody else's land, kicking them out of that land, and then ruling them in a brutal occupation involving torture and the shooting of children in the head with live ammunition. This is a song called Occupation.
Ask me how it is that I dare to take a side. You say I loathe myself, pointing out you have lied. You say it's tribal warfare, but I disagree, for the dynamics of the situation are not difficult to see. On the one side is the fighter jet, on the other is the stone. On the one side is the slave, on the other is the throne. For the many there are checkpoints, while foreign soldiers rule the streets. For the one side there is victory, but the people don't accept defeat. The word you need to know is occupation, the very definition of a land without a nation. And if peace is what you're after, then let us not deceive. It'll come on the day the tanks return to Tel Aviv. On the one side there is hunger and bulldozed olive trees. On the other is the army, ruling by decrees. Caterpillars maul the streets, destroy whole city blocks, while children swallow shrapnel for the crime of throwing rocks. Fences are erected around the towns they flatten, and Hertz's own fanatics sleep on sheets of satin, and they water their plantations, drilling ever deeper wells, while the displaced children of the hopeless are filled with bullet shells. The word you need to know is occupation, the very definition of a land without a nation. And if peace is what you're after, then let us not deceive. It'll come on the day the settlers return to Tel Aviv. On the one side there's the Mossad rounding up the men thrown in jail with no trial, being tortured once again. On the other there is rage, helplessness and fear, and a growing realization that another Holocaust is near. On the outside there are prisons, the inside detainees being stripped of their humanity, beaten naked to their knees. Outside the ghetto walls, stormtroopers all around, while inside the hungry people yearn for liberated ground. The word you need to know is occupation, the very definition of a land without a nation. And if peace is what you're after, then let us not deceive. It'll come on the day the jail guards return to Tel Aviv. Say the children of Jerusalem will be free one day. In overcrowded camps amidst the stench of death and flies to the suburbs of Detroit, you can hear the anguish cries. While in the land of Israel, with God ever on their side, walls and fences are constructed, papers are denied. People fight for their existence while we turn a blinded eye. And those who should know better insist on asking why. The word you need to know is occupation, very definition of a land without a nation. And if peace is what you're after, then let us not deceive. It will come on the day the refugees return to Tel Aviv.
Occupation, and I think there's a hunger strike going on here in the United States. In California, there are tens of thousands of prisoners on hunger strike because there is a policy here in the U.S. of keeping people indefinitely in solitary confinement, starting out with incredibly severe, outrageously long prison sentences, and then holding people in incredibly overcrowded conditions in solitary confinement with no windows. It's torture. By the rest of the world recognizes this as torture, the United Nations, etc. But in the U.S., it's common practice to torture prisoners this way. And in Israel, it's very much common practice as well. And the practice of indefinitely detaining people without trial is common practice, and also indefinitely detaining children without trial is common practice. And one man who was arrested one too many times was Hadar Adnan, and after the last time he was arrested, he began a hunger strike, which became a globally known phenomenon, and he received support from around the world, very much including the occupied 6 counties of the north of Ireland, where there were similar hunger strikes by other people who were accused of the same sorts of offenses as Hadar Adnan and organizations that he's been involved with, namely resisting occupation, which is totally legal under the United Nations, whether it's in Ireland or in Palestine. But Hadar Adnan, like Bobby Sands and others, was called a terrorist, and like Bobby Sands, Hadar Adnan also had massive popular support, both among his people and around the world. And I wrote this song, Hadar Adnan, Bobby Sands, which is on my album Everything Can Change, and also free on Bandcamp, free on SoundCloud, if you want to download it there. And I would encourage people listening to download that version rather than the one that's gotten a lot more attention is one I recorded in my bedroom, and this one sounds better. It was recorded in a studio. Here's Khader Adnan Bobby Sands. Khader Adnan grew up near Jenin City. You could say he was a product of his time. Ever since he was a kid, he'd get arrested, though he was never charged with any crime. Spending half his life in prison, a life lived like so many of his friends. Arbitrary and indefinite detention, never knowing if your jail time would end. Khader Adnan was arrested last December. Again, he wasn't told the reason why. He was shackled, he was beaten, he was tortured, there beneath the Middle Eastern sky. Perhaps there was a moment when he realized that right then with his body he'd say no. But from then on he refused to eat another meal, like in Belfast not many years ago. Khader Adnan grew up in a war zone, but all the tanks and planes were only on one side. It was a type of war that they call occupation, settlement, removal, fratricide. And anyone who talked about resistance, who thought they did not deserve to be a slave, would be looking down the barrel of a gun and often find themselves inside an early grave. Khader Adnan loves his wife and daughters, and he likes to eat his daily bread. But in prison he can't see his children or live life with the lady that he wed. So on behalf of all the children without fathers, he decided he had to strike a blow. He said, I will have dignity or death, like in Belfast not many years ago. Each time Khader Adnan was arrested, in prison he would learn a little more. And soon he became the teacher. And he'd talk about the times that came before. They talked about civil disobedience. They talked about the ballot and the gun. They talked about the occupied 6 counties and the H-blocks in 1981. Khader Adnan talked of perseverance and how someday their people might be free. How someday they might hear their children laughing, unafraid how someday things could be. Then at 3:30 on one morning, the soldiers came, their rifles pointed low, and they took Khader Adnan from his family, like in Belfast not many years ago. They say Khader Adnan is a terrorist, just like they said of Bobby Sands, because he dares speak out against injustice, because he dares to make a stand, because he dares believe that he is human and he does not deserve to live this way, because he dares to consider an alternative, because he dares imagine a new day. Khader Adnan lost his liberty before he was born. To fight for life, its death he must embrace. But just like others come before him, there are others waiting to take his place. And even the great powers can lose interest in supporting such a vicious status quo, because you can't break a man who won't be broken, like in Belfast not many years ago. Like in Belfast not many years ago. That's Khader Adnan Bobby Sands from Everything Can Change. That's Alejandro Arenas and June Bustamante on that lovely backing music on that jazz piano. And so moving on back to my album from 2003. Here's a song about an American woman, Rachel Corey from Olympia, Washington, just north of where I live in Portland, Oregon, who joined the international solidarity movement to try to prevent the Israeli military from destroying people's homes. people who were in some way or another opposed to the occupation, trying to resist the Israeli governments and the destruction of olive trees and fig trees and homes of people where they want to build more settlements, etc. Rachel Corrie went there along with many others from around the world to try to stop the madness, and she sat down in front of a bulldozer and was run over by an armored bulldozer made in the state of Illinois. And Rachel was one of several different foreigners from the U.S. and Britain to be killed, Turkey to be killed by the Israeli military. And I'll mention others soon. And here's a song I wrote in 2003, days after Rachel was killed, called "The Death of Rachel Corrie."
When she sat down in the dirt in front of your machine, a lovely woman dressed in red, you in military green. If you had met her in Jerusalem, you might have asked her on a date. But here you were in Gaza, rolling towards the gate. As your foot went to the floor, did you recall her eyes? Did her gaze remind you that you've become what you despise? As you rolled on towards this woman and ignored all shouts to stop, did you feel a shred of doubt as you watched her body drop? As your caterpillar tracks upon her body pressed with 60 tons of deadly force, crushed the bones within her chest, could you feel the contours of her face as you took her life away? Did you serve your country well on that cool spring day? The green line back to the open shore. Was this just another day in a dirty war? When you looked out on the water, did you feel an empty void? Or was it just one more life you've taken, one more home destroyed, one more home destroyed?
And the most egregious example of the Israeli military killing people without any weapons, who were peacefully and non-violently trying to break the Israeli blockade of Gaza, was when they massacred 9 people, and really, could have killed many more. They were firing wildly and indiscriminately at the ship, the Mavi Marmara, that they had boarded, which was on its way to peacefully try to bring food and medicine to the occupied people of the Gaza Strip. And other ships, including one named after Rachel Corrie, that came from Ireland, were the people on board were brutalized, including having their bones broken and property destroyed. But on the Mavi Marmara, they opened fire with machine guns and guns from helicopter gunships and killed 9, injured many, many more. And if not for the presence of Westerners like Kevin Nish on board, quite likely many more people would have been killed. And this is a song I wrote after that incident while I was glued to Al Jazeera in Copenhagen. This is a song for the Mavi Marmara.
In 48 they were driven out at the point of a machine gun. Families fled in fear to Jordan, Syria and Lebanon. They fled around the globe, firmly held in terror's grip. And about 1 million refugees ended up in the Gaza Strip. In 1967, the IDF moved in, and the refugees in Gaza became refugees again. Settlers took their farmland, soldiers took the ports, and the people were surrounded by military forts. In 2007, they cut them off completely. No access to the borders, no access to the sea. The world began to see this unavoidable stamp. The most crowded place on earth was now a concentration camp. Israeli jet fighters bombed Gaza from the air, and they kept out the supplies needed to rebuild and repair. They kept out the convoys of humanitarian aid, anemic children going hungry, crushed and burned in bombing raids from around the world. Good people tried to get across the border to the other side. Almost all of them were turned away, deported back to Turkey, Jordan, France, the USA. They were barred from ever coming back. Adam and Huwaida decided on a different tack. They loaded up a boat, managed to get through. That's when activists in Istanbul decided what to do. Armed with food and wheelchairs and prosthetic limbs for victims of the bombing raids to wear. They packed cement by the ton. They had a few kitchen knives, but not a single gun. They were determined to reach the bay, to break the siege of Gaza and not be turned away. As they left Turkish waters, everybody wished them well. As for what would happen next, only the apartheid state could tell. All aboard the Mavi Marmara, sailing toward Goliath's kingdom, armed with nothing but a stone. All aboard the Mavi Marmara, tell the children of Jerusalem, you are not alone. 700 people on board this Turkish ferry. They were 60 miles from the shore, out in the open sea, in international waters, with no plans for turning back. That's when Netanyahu told his soldiers to attack. They came down from helicopters, fired guns from Zodiacs. They shot some people in their heads and others in their backs. The captain raised a white flag high into the air, but the soldiers kept on shooting beneath the floodlights' glare. The soldiers kept on shooting. It was a free fire zone. So many dead and wounded, just how many isn't known. So many dead and wounded, blood flowing on the floor. The soldiers kept on shooting 60 miles from the shore. Medics tried to treat the wounded, all they could do was watch them bleed. The soldiers wouldn't let them get the urgent help they needed. Mass troopers held their hostages, the Navy towed the ship, just for trying to sail to the Gaza Strip. All aboard the Mavi Marmara, sailing toward Goliath's kingdom, armed with nothing but a stone. All aboard the Mavi Marmara, tell the children of Jerusalem, you are not alone. every laptop, every camera and cell phone. This is what Goliath does to those who dare to throw a stone. The ghost of the Exodus is shouting at the sky, but Netanyahu isn't listening, he's just watching people die. For days nobody knew just what happened on that boat, because everyone was held in jail and dead men do not float. All the world will remember what happened on that night, and to end the siege of Gaza, more will go and join the fight. All aboard the Rachel Corrie, sailing toward Goliath's kingdom, armed with nothing but a stone. All aboard the Rachel Corrie, tell the children of Jerusalem, you are not alone. All aboard the Mavi Marmara, sailing toward Goliath's kingdom, armed with nothing but a stone. All aboard the Mavi Marmara, tell the children of Jerusalem, you are not alone.
That's from Big Red Sessions album from 2011, and back here in the USA, there are 5 men in prison in a communications management unit in solitary confinement with almost no contact with the outside world, who are being held, having been convicted of trying to send food and medicine to people in occupied Palestinian land with no through the wrong channels. Basically, they're not accused of sending weapons or aiding terrorists, so-called, in any way other than by sending food and medicine destined for hungry and needy people living under occupation. And they were convicted by a jury in Texas, and they're in prison for between 15 and 65 years, convicted based on testimony provided by an anonymous Mossad agent in an American court. This is a song I wrote, which is on my album Meanwhile in Afghanistan, called The Holy Land 5.
They grew up among the bombs of the occupation, bulldozed houses, that was the situation. Refugee camps, Khan Yunis and Shatila, children gunned down in the Intifada. Poverty and hunger, a place to slowly die. These 5 men decided at least they had to try. From their homes in Texas to the stateless nation, they started up the Holy Land Foundation. They sent food and medicine, that's all they ever did, aside from sending toys for little kids. Feed the hungry, they say that's a good deed, but apparently it all depends on who you want to feed. If they're living in the ghettos under IDF command, if they think they don't deserve to starve in their homeland, if Sharon said all that's theirs is mine, if they're from a place called Palestine. The Holy Land is crying out, leaving little room for doubt. From ruined homes, the kids ask you, what in the world will you do? They sent money to the Zakat committees, the same ones funded by USAID, but these were Arabs aiding Palestinians. They opposed the occupation and they were Muslims. Their phones were tapped for years, but nothing could be found. So with an executive order, Bush shut them down, freezing all their funds, taking food from kids. That's exactly what the U.S. government did. These men support Hamas, the government proclaimed, although they couldn't find a cent sent in their name, but they had evidence. For the first time in a court, an anonymous Israeli would submit his report behind a veil with no right to cross-examination. He could smell Hamas. This was his explanation. First the jury hung, so they tried them again, and for feeding hungry people they were sent to prison. The Holy Land is crying out, leaving little room for doubt. From ruined homes, the kids ask you, what 5 men are in cells, no one knows what for. Every Muslim an unindicted co-conspirator. Be careful what you say, be wary what you hear, or end up in a CMU for 65 years. Cut off from the world, held in a little box. Back home kids are getting shot for throwing rocks. No one stops the charity sending money for tanks, for illegal settlements all over the West Bank. This is justice in America. If you didn't know it, now you do. A retrial was denied, I should mention that too. A retrial was denied, who knows who's next to go, to be tortured in a little Guantanamo. The Constitution suspended, they just haven't let us know. It's easier that way, just say it isn't so. The Holy Land Foundation, you know it's true. They just did what all of us should do. The Holy Land is crying out, leaving little room for doubt. From ruined homes, the kids ask you, what in the world will you do? The Holy Land is crying out, leaving little room for doubt. From ruined homes, the kids ask you, what in the world will you do?
That's the Holy Land 5, and then of course there are the people, other people who have spent incredible amounts of time in solitary confinement in Israeli prisons. Of course, there are the many Palestinians who have been in prison for decades for opposing the occupation, and then there are Israeli citizens who have been imprisoned for decades for, in the case of Mordechai Vanunu, for blowing the whistle on Israel's secret nuclear weapons program, which is still not publicly acknowledged by Israel or by the U.S., although it's often alluded to in ways which are sort of kind of funny in a way, the way that they have to allude to the drone program before they were allowed to admit it existed, even though, of course, it's covered in the media and you can see the pictures of the dead bodies, etc. In the case of the Israeli nuclear program, you can see the pictures of the missiles and other things that Mordechai Vanunu was able to get out of Israel and show to the world. And for doing that, he was kidnapped off the streets of Rome by the Mossad and brought back to Israel, where he spent 18 years in prison, most of it in solitary confinement. And now the conditions of his release, so-called, is that he is not allowed to speak to the media or to foreigners, and he's not allowed to leave Israel. And so he's constantly, somehow or other, breaking those conditions, which are hard not to break, and by talking to foreigners, for example, by going out with a Norwegian woman, and by occasionally talking to the media, and so he's constantly being rearrested, but he's most of the time in the so-called free world, living in East Jerusalem, where he's well loved by the Palestinian people, who still make up most of the population of East Jerusalem, at least at the moment. Here's a song I wrote, which is on the album from last spring, Everything Can Change, called Vanunu.
I was born in Marrakesh, and I thought life was good. Then some visitors came from far away, convinced us that we should move from Marrakesh to Israel, what they called the Promised Land. That's how we ended up in Beersheba by the Negev desert sand. I turned 18 and joined the army, that's what everybody did. I learned to blow up bridges, just like every other kid. I learned to fire weapons, I learned how to shoot to kill. Then I studied engineering and learned many other skills. I got a job, paid the rent, working just like you. I just did what I had to do. As the years went by, I learned many things, and I wondered what to do with the burden knowledge brings. I learned about the massacres committed in my name. After Sabra and Shatila, life could never be the same. But I got up every morning, worked till the day was through, and I did what I had to do. Working in the desert, I did what I was told, though I'd long ago rejected the bill of goods I had been sold. I was supposed to ask no questions, but as the years passed by, I discovered what was going on there beneath the clear blue sky. I snuck a camera into work one day as my suspicions grew, and I did what I had to do. Once I left the country, I could no longer sit on the fence. I met with a reporter and displayed the evidence of the secret nuclear arsenal which I had helped to make. I had to blow the whistle for humanity's sake. The world simply had to find out the things my commanders knew. So I did what I had to do. Mossad came to get me on the streets of Rome, brought me in a boat back to my adopted home. After 18 years of torture in a tiny prison cell on the street, some people ask me how I lived so long in hell. Each morning when I woke up, I remembered it was true that I did what I had to do. I did what I had to do.
It's June Bustamante and Alejandro Arenas playing along, and June's singing. Great album, if I don't say so myself. Moving back to another album, Songs for Mahmoud, which I recorded in Texas in 2004. I wrote this song soon after a child was killed by a sniper for the crime of catching songbirds too close to the border in Gaza, in an olive grove where songbirds often hang out, and where children and others regularly catch songbirds to sell them in the markets, where having songbirds at your home is very popular among Palestinians, and so they can sell a songbird at the market for like $10, which is a heck of a lot of money, and for them, and this child, Mahmoud Al-Qayed, was, I believe, the 10th child to be killed in that olive grove for the same crime of catching songbirds, if I recall the statistic at the time correctly. And incidentally, the reference to the wood stove is a real reference. It actually gets cold in the winter in the Gaza Strip, and people burn wood in stoves. So I didn't make that up in case people think I did. This is Song the Songbird Sings.
Was another Friday morning, I was among the olive trees, out looking for birds to catch, my father, his friends, and me. I had my string and net, and a nimble eye. There beside the farmer's field, where the songbirds fly. When you're catching birds, the world disappears, and 1,000 songs of autumn are all that fills your ears. They sing their songs so brightly at the dawning of the day. They fly back and forth over the fence where we must stay away. You can see the birds beneath the clouds, watch them spread their wings. Listen to the wind and the songbirds sing. It's so good to come here, so far from all the sound of all the shooting and the shouting and the tanks upon the ground. I just wish I could live here beside this olive grove, just me, my friends and family, and a small wood burning stove. You can see the birds beneath the clouds, watch them spread their wings. Listen to the wind and the songbirds sing. Last week I caught 3 sparrows, it was quite a day. Now I'm bound for glory, that's what they say. I can hear them talk about me, shedding tears upon a sack. Inside there lies a child with 4 bullets in his back. You can see the birds beneath the clouds, watch them spread their wings. Listen to the wind and the songbirds sings. You can see the birds beneath the clouds, watch them spread their wings. Listen to the wind and the songbirds sing.
And then, of course, there's the actual resistance, not just people getting shot for being children, but people who try to resist in more violent ways and then are broadly condemned for such a thing. But according to the United Nations, it's violent or nonviolent resistance to occupation is legal and perfectly justified. And it's often said wrongly that suicide bombers are motivated by religious fervor or religious extremism, and the reality is that the overwhelming majority of suicide bombing operations are carried out by people who are motivated by a deep sense of personal loss. In the case of, in many cases it's because their parents were killed violently after being tortured and that sort of thing by the Israeli military that claims to be such a moral military, which is as far from the truth as it could be. And this song was played regularly on the BBC by Andy Kershaw when he had his show, and since he lost his show, I'm pretty sure this song and my music generally has never been heard on the BBC, not surprisingly. I met one of the producers that he used to work with recently, who said that every time they played my songs they got in trouble. And Andy was willing to take the rap for getting in trouble, but I think other people who are less iconic figures in BBC are less willing to take the rap Or maybe they just don't like my music. Who knows? That's always possible. Here's my song, Janine. Child, what will you remember when you recall your 16th year? The horrid sound of helicopter gunships, the rumble of the tanks as they drew near, as the world went about its business, and I burned another tank of gasoline. Dow Jones lost a couple points that day while you were crying in the city of Janine. Did they even give your parents warning before they blew the windows out with shells, while you hid inside the high school basement amidst the ringing of church bells, as you watched your teacher crumple by the doorway, and in England they were toasting to the Queen? You were so far from the thoughts of so many, huddled in the city of Janine. Were you thinking of the taunting of the soldiers, or of the shit they smeared upon the walls? Were you thinking of your cousin after torture, or Tel Aviv and its glittering shopping malls? When the fat men in their mansions say that you don't want peace, did you wonder what they mean as you sat amidst the stench inside the darkness in the shattered city of Janine? What went through your mind on that day at the sight of your mother's vacant eyes, as she lay still among the rubble beneath the blue Middle Eastern skies, as you stood upon this bulldozed building beside the settlements and their hills so green, as your tears gave way to grim determination amidst the ruins of the city of Janine. And why should anybody wonder, as you stepped on board the crowded bus across the green line, and you reached inside your jacket for the cord? Were you thinking of your neighbors' buried bodies as you made the stage for this scene, as you set off the explosives that were strapped around your waist? Were you thinking of the city of Janine? There's a man, I don't know what his status right now is in terms of whether he's in prison or not, but Abu Rahman, Abdullah Abu Rahma in the town of Bilain in the West Bank, where the authorities, the Israeli authorities, have been trying to expand their apartheid wall. He was arrested some years ago for possession of weapons, and the weapons that he was arrested for possessing were spent tear gas canisters and that sort of thing. and that had been fired at him and his and other members of his community by the Israelis during protests against the wall. And the wall is not a wall that is dividing the West Bank and Israel. If Israel were to acknowledge the existence of their own borders, it's not on those borders. It's a wall that snakes through the West Bank like a serpent and divides towns from their farmland and further steals more and more land from Palestinians in the name of security, which is what Israel does. This is a song from, I believe this is a version from Songs for Mahmoud called They're Building a Wall.
They're building a wall between friends, a wall that justifies any means further ends, a wall between Semites, rich and poor, brothers and sisters, from not so long before, many feet thick and 20 feet high. No one can look through it and into the eye of a person you might know, to whom you might confide. Now just a stranger on the other side. They're building a wall between water and land, so we can eat fruit and they can eat sand. A wall to make sure that our orchards will grow and our kids can get fat and not need to know of the cities in ruins and the children in fear that your fathers and brothers in tanks might be near. A wall to keep quiet that which you fear most, so you don't have to listen to your grandfather's ghost. They're building a wall between future and past, a wall to keep distant the chambers of gas from the bulldozers, gunships, and the tears of a child. Dignity, love, and honor defiled, to remove reality from your facts on the ground. A wall to keep distant the terrible sound of the houses that crumble and the children that die. A wall to keep separate the truth from the lie. They're building a wall, and at such a cost. Land, money, and safety, and all the lives lost. A wall made of brick, but bricks can be broken when the people of Zion have finally awoken and said no more walls, no more refugees, no more keeping people upon their knees. And then the history books will someday recall, before apartheid was ended, they were building a wall.
That's actually not from Songs from Mahmoud. That's from my album The Commons, and that's Ali Rosenblatt singing with me and Eric Royer on banjo. And I got one more song in the queue here for you all, and thanks to everybody who is out there listening, and to everybody who listens to this program in the future, whether you're listening now or in the future. Your donations are most welcome. If you want to help me keep on doing what I'm doing, you can buy any of these albums that I'm talking about on my website at davidrovics.com. You can make donations there as well with the donate button, or you can subscribe by clicking on the subscription link, and all that is most welcome. And but just share the music. That's also very, very welcome, because it needs to get out there if it's any good. And then when people hear it, then some of them organize gigs for me, and that's how it works. So there it is in a nutshell. Your commercial announcement for the day, which, as I always say, allows me to keep my U.S. passport one more day, because we have to make commercial announcements every day. If you didn't know that, now you do. It's part of the social obligation of citizenship. And shopping. Shopping, of course. And I'll close with one other song that I wrote in 2002, which is on my album that I did with Ali, Hang a Flag in the Window. And I read something in the Palestine Chronicle online about an encounter between refugees, Jewish refugees from Iraq in Israel, living in a stolen property, and then the Palestinian former residents of their stolen property came to visit them one day, and it was a beautiful story, and I wrote the song after reading that, and I hope you've all enjoyed this show, Palestine 101. Although enjoyed might be the wrong word. I hope you got something out of it anyway. I usually try to include more funny and optimistic material in my sets, but I've always found this subject of the Palestinian struggle to be one that I haven't found a whole lot to laugh about or to be optimistic about. So that's what stopped me from doing shows all related to Palestine. Is basically it's all depressing, but there's always hope, so this song is a bit hopeful, and so I'll close with this one. And thanks a lot, Jack and Donnie and Hannah and everybody else who's been listening, and Mark, and hope to see you on the road and in the streets.
1948, I fled my village. The Stern Gang drove my family from the lands. We ran into the desert, where I've spent these decades living by my hands. Life in Haifa wasn't easy, so much better than this hellhole with the soldiers and barbed wire and the closures and the hunger, the humiliation and the checkpoints, the machine gun fire. And each day I wonder, after Haifa, the home that we abandoned when the Zionists had won, is there a family with a child? Does its father love it as I loved my only son before the soldiers shot him down, riddled him with bullets in his back and in his head? Home in Haifa, in my house, does his father know the pain there is in an empty bed? I fled my country, left the Tigris River for this foreign place. I had to leave home, I didn't want to, but they were rounding up the leftists and the papers had my face. And my son, a student leader on the streets of Baghdad, was nowhere to be found. So I walked through the mountains, just the shirt upon my back, knowing not where I was bound. Now here I am, this town of Haifa, in this little house, but at least I'm still alive. And each day I wonder, how is Baghdad? Would I recognize my friends if any did indeed survive? It took a long time, but I made a life here, and I wish my son could be here in this town upon the shore. I was with my wife, it was the Sabbath, when an old Arab couple knocked upon our door. that's what you do with strangers. We could see they meant no harm. We told our story, they told theirs. Us of our life in Baghdad, them of their family farm, and of this house which they once lived in, where once they raised a family long before their hair turned gray, and of their son and the troopers, and of ours, whom we still cry for every day. So much in common, so much gone bad, so much running and never coming home. You can hear the cards falling down, see the faces of the children forever forced to roam. And here we were in this house, fearing that tomorrow would be just like yesterday. So much resentment, so much at stake, and I really don't remember who was the first to say, in one world, in one village, in one home, let us live together. In one world, in one village, in one home, let us live together. In one world, in one village, in one home, let us live together. In one world.
All right, well, I was going to leave, but I just have to say thanks so much to Jack and Donnie for making yet another contribution to my livelihood. And you know, I was thinking if 10% of the people on my email list were as generous as Jack and Donnie are, then I would be rich, actually. But oh well. But thanks so much to you guys and everybody else who's supporting what I do, or anybody else who's active politically around Palestine or any other number of extremely important causes. And I'll be leaving in, let's see, on the 25th of July. I embark on a tour of 4 continents, starting in Hawaii and then going to Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong, France, Belgium, Germany, probably also Denmark, maybe Norway, then New York, Ontario, and Quebec before I head home. And if anybody lives in any of those places and you want to organize a show, there's still plenty of time. I got lots of room for more. And I'd love to hear from you. And I'll also be doing shows in later in the fall in Florida and Texas, Oklahoma, Illinois, and British Columbia and elsewhere. So hope to hear from folks in Europe, Asia, North America, Australia soon. If anybody wants to organize a show, you can get on my email list too, at davidrovics.com. On the bottom of the screen, get on my email list, and then you'll know about when a show is coming to you. And yeah, as I said, hope to see you on the road and in the streets, and I will sign off now. Thanks again, everybody, and keep on keeping on.